gone and got our forage sample done. We've got our bag of feed. We've worked out what do we do then? Do we send it to a nutritionist to then evaluate it and tell them this is what we're feeding, and then do you guys then test that?
Absolutely. Once you have the forage analyzed, then you need to figure out how much you're feeding. And how much you're feeding is not volume. Our universal measurement of hay is a flake. For Australians, it's a biscuit. And that doesn't tell you how much you're feeding. So you actually need to weigh that and get the weight of the feed being provided. And the same with the supplements. It's not good enough to say I feed a scoop or a dipper or a coffee can of something. You actually need to get the weight of that product. If you gave the weight of the hay fed, the nutrient analysis of the hay, the type of grain, the type of supplement and amount provided, absolutely, a nutritionist can go through that very quickly, compare that to the actual nutrient requirement of the horse, and get pretty close to saying, you're way out of bounds here, or you need to fortify additionally here, and get you on at least a sound program.
So we don't actually have to send the feed to you guys. We just got to send you, okay, we've got 14% protein in alfalfa, and 20% in our feed.
Absolutely. All you'd have to do is send the analysis of the forage, because that's the largest missing link, if you will. And then say I feed brand X feed. We can get the nutrient profile off the internet or off the actual packaging. And I feed supplement Y, and we can get the information off the supplement. As long as we know the amounts fed, then we can piece the rest of it together.
Right, and how much does that cost to get a nutritionist to look at that?
Probably if they didn't have any lab fees, in other words, if you paid for the $30 hay analysis, certainly somewhere around $100 would be adequate to go through that, put that on paper, and tell you something reasonable about your horse.
Right, so we've got to start weighing these dippers of feed so we really get an idea of what percentage of body weight we should be feeding.
Absolutely, and you only need to do it once. Most people will feed by buckets or scoops, but if someone has an idea of that scoop contains 3 pounds of grain, or that scoop contains a pound of alfalfa cubes, you only have to know that once, and then just keep the same size scoops, and you don't have to weigh down all the labor force feeding the horses. Just tell them in scoops, as long as someone has figured it out ahead of time and gives you the correct volumes to feed.
And what are the most important elements or nutrients? Is there 5 or 6 most important ones that are critical for you guys to look at?
Yeah, certainly all of them are critical, but there's certain places that will start. First is the calorie content of the diet, and that's the one thing that you can look at and tell whether you're getting correct or not. If you're feeding a cutting horse too many calories, he'll gain weight. By the same token, if you're not feeding a cutting horse enough calories, then that's the one you start to see melt. He'll show some rib, he'll look like he's lost weight, and he has. So certainly the calorie content of the diet. And then with all of the muscular work, the turning and the work that a cutting horse does, protein is very critical as well. Protein is essential for muscle rebuilding, muscle synthesis in general, but also bone. So I would get protein as one of the essential nutrients that I would consider. I would consider calcium and phosphorus, the 2 minerals that are in the largest content of bone. And then I would pick some trace minerals. Copper, zinc, selenium would be the first ones that I would check. And that's certainly not all the nutrients that you need to be concerned with, but those are some big ones that you certainly can easily get correct.
And Dr. Trotter, medically, is that the same nutrients from what you're looking at with joint replacement and health?
Yes, it would really be the same group. Items that go into joint supplements are not really part of the regular feedstuff nutrients, even though those same feedstuff nutrients are the ones that end up in the joint fluid and provide the regular nutrition to cartilage. Most joint supplements are going to have some of the minerals in them, but the other ingredients are sort of targeting more focused part of the metabolic process within the joint. But the key ingredients are the ones that Steve just mentioned, key basic nutrients to virtually all tissues. There are others, but those are the key ones for sure. I was curious, Steve, from the years of doing hay analysis, what are the big outliers, would you say, in terms of variability in some of the key nutrients that you'll get alfalfa versus grass that could make real impactful differences?
Yeah, what we've seen, and we've seen from routine analysis, is just overall the quality of the hay that we have today compared to maybe what your dad fed or your grandfather fed. We're seeing a decline in the trace mineral content. Mm-hmm. And that's largely a function of fertilization. Mm-hmm. We're fertilizing with nitrogen to get plants to grow, but we're often not going back and repairing the soils or correcting the pH in the soil so that they can pick up the copper, the zinc, the manganese, the selenium. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a general decline in that. And now even more recently, we're seeing even some of our grass hays not have enough calcium content. So we're actually getting phosphorus content above the calcium, which will end up tying up some of the calcium. Here in Texas, a lot of that's corrected in the sense that they'll feed a lot of imported alfalfa hay. Alfalfa hay is very high in calcium, predictably high in calcium, and that helps repair some of that. But we're not seeing, in general, we're not seeing the same hays that you would have seen even 15 years ago. The nutrients are declining in those hays. So a horse or a broodmare that subsisted on a hay water diet, they're not getting the same nutrition that they did even 15 years ago.
One of the other questions I had relates to feeding alfalfa. There's a lot of variability, I think, in this area. People who feed alfalfa only, alfalfa cubes only, along with a grain type feed stuff as well. But those that feed coastal grass with a little alfalfa versus alfalfa only, and a big difference obviously in calcium phosphorus in those feeds. Do you see much of a problem in that area? I don't know if it's accounted for in a lot of those situations, the difference in the mineral levels.
Exactly, and it's typically not accounted for. Most supplements don't make a distinction of whether your forage is an alfalfa base or if it's a mix an alfalfa and a coastal base, or it's just a coastal base. Most don't pay any attention to that, but it's absolutely critical. If you're feeding an alfalfa-based diet, you're very high in calcium, very low in phosphorus. If you're not feeding a lot of grain to go with that, okay, you could be deficient in phosphorus, which is a critical mineral for bone health, for joint health. And so that needs to be made up. And again, that goes back to the whole nutrition. If you just understand, this is my forage component, and I'm feeding this many pounds of alfalfa, this many pounds of coastal, and it's being fed with whatever the rest of the diet. A nutritionist can make some very fine tuning of that and head off a lot of potential problems.
Yeah.
You're down here in Texas and you're looking at a few cutting ranches. What are you seeing is the fundamental weakness that we are doing in our industry from a nutrition perspective?
I think specifically here in Texas, there's a lot of pressure to feed this supplement or that supplement with no basic knowledge of whether I need that supplement or if that supplement's helping my overall program. I think the forage feeding is generally quite sound. I think a lot of people are importing or utilizing some alfalfa, which has boosted the overall quality of the forage part of the diet from a straight coastal to a more of a coastal plus a alfalfa diet. I think that's good. I don't think that there's a tremendous high volume of grain fed to these horses, which again, I think that's a good thing as well. But I think the whole mystique of a magic supplement to cure this or to cure that is alive and well in the cutting horse industry. And someone just needs to have some common sense and say, this one seems to help me, this one doesn't, and put it on paper nutritionally, and then make an informed decision rather than a sponsored decision or I was beat last week by a trainer that feeds this, I'll just randomly add that to my diet. Have a little more confidence in your horse and your training and get things analyzed and be a bit more precise about it.
So that can be answered two ways. We send away for an analysis, and also as trainers or owners, we need to be more perceptive and maybe look in the feed bucket every morning like the thoroughbred guys do to see if they're eating all their feed.
Absolutely. as a trainer, you have a lot of things going on, but you do need to have at least a general concept of, are my horses cleaning up the feed? Are they leaving a portion of the feed? Does it seem to be the same thing that they're leaving? Do I have a palatability issue? The trainer certainly needs to know, does this horse have enough calories? Is he doing what I want? Does he look the way I want? Is his hair coat good? All those visual things that would indicate health. And then certainly they need to say, this is my feeding program. It's been looked at, it's been analyzed, it's generally on track, and then stick to that rather than get adding every supplement in hopes of curing all kinds of things.